Everyone, welcome back to the Long Roll Podcast. I am one half of your hosts, commentators on this platform, your social media manager to the Eddie M's workshop. I am also an Air Force photographer of going on 19 years now. Incredible experiences, incredible work, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Nice. I am Janiqua, your less crusty Air Force photographer.
Beautiful.
It'll be 10 years this year in December. So that's interesting. Yeah.
That's
I don't
sad.
know who let me stay in this long, but here we are.
Mm-hmm.
I am also a Black team hopeful for this year, so I'll be putting my application in.
So when you think of Australia, what comes to mind?
So the first thing that comes to mind is P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney.
What is that?
That's Finding Nemo. Dory had to memorize this address, and it was P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second thing that comes to mind is I saw a video of a kangaroo standing in the middle of a body of water. And someone said, if you ever see a kangaroo doing this, don't get in the water because they will drown you. And I believe that. I believe them. Because why was the kangaroo there? He wasn't bathing. He was just standing there, hulked up, staring in the people's eyes. And so, yeah, that's what I think about is kangaroos and how they are sadistic and maniacal killers. So
yes, no, it's definitely different than growing up through grade school and having this fluffy impression of kangaroos. And as you grow up in social media, takes over the world and people put their clips out there. And there was this clip that went around a couple of years ago of this kangaroo grabbing this guy's dog by the throat. This guy jumps out of his vehicle, sprints towards the kangaroo and punches it in the face. Everybody was in shock. The people looking at the video, the kangaroo itself was in such shock it let go of the dog and had to process everything that happened. And the guy just walks back, to his ATV like a pissed off parent, just mad that there was this other rude parent that may have yelled at their kid. And that was my takeaway. But anyways,
because what does that really show, right? Does the video show how crazy kangaroos are, or does the video show how badass you have to be an Australian? Like that, that is the takeaway, right? What is more dangerous, kangaroos or Australians? And I think the truth is, in order to live in that environment, you have to be a badass.
So our guest this week, Michaela Skovranova, is one of those resident badasses of Australia. It was a journey just for her and her family to get to the point where that's where they call home, or it's where at least she calls home now. And why I asked that silly question at the beginning, because that's something that's been on my mind in a funny way for years, because in America, you see those memes where it's like, Australia's beautiful, but everything there will kill you. And she debunked that in a way in this week's episode, which again, I'm excited to get that conclusion. Janiqua, don't take this away from me.
Well, you got to believe what you want to believe. Everyone's got to have something to look forward to. So
Michaela is just, what a talent, what a master at capturing the essence of the environments and humanity, whether it's on digital or film. Was looking through her work, we were definitely awestruck because it has like a dreamscape feel to it. I can't remember the word that you specifically used, but it's surreal. Ethereal. That's a lot better. That's a grown-up word. It is. I mean, it's ethereal. It really, when you look at, go ahead and stop this podcast now, press pause and go check out her shots. It just seems insane. And the fact that she's also respecting the distance and the space between her and this wildlife, and she can still make it seem you as the viewer are in this intimate setting, is a testament of her ability.
It feels like looking at those pictures, it's almost like we're not on the same planet. It's like she has access to something that I would dream of seeing. And truthfully, we get into this a little bit. I don't know whether I would save those moments for myself or whether I would pull out my camera.
Exactly. And I mean, I think her perspective on this definitely helps me better align that if I find myself in those situations in the future, I can be more thoughtful. And I really appreciate that. Her work has been featured about just about everywhere. National Geographic, Time Magazine. Her talent knows no bounds. I think she was actually the first live stream on Facebook for like live streaming underwater, like in the ocean. That to me is incredible. And I think if I recall, it may have dealt with sharks. So again, like being, you're a resident Australian now, and you're jumping full into that to where I'm going to go swimming with sharks. No big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wouldn't be me, but we all have our things, and she's very adamant about the safety aspect of it and about respecting the space and stuff.
And so, and two, like she loves to give back. I know we briefly talk about like workshops or how she grew up in a community of photographers in Australia and then giving back. But when we found out when speaking with her that she's actually a part of the EAW family. She's actually, back in 2017, she was giving feedback to portfolios. And so that was really cool to find the connection that before, it wasn't so readily available through all the little research that we did. So I guess, I know it's just awesome now to be able to call Michaela a friend, and to just like be able to be more connected with the work that she accomplishes.
Indeed. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get the episode started.
Yep. We'll stop rambling. There we go.
It's a great picture. It's a great new look. Profile pic.
Look. Yes, my mom would be so proud. But again, no, thank you so much for the time. And I know, like, as I've looked at your work and as you've popped up, because I manage the page for the social media page for all the Eddie Adams workshop. And when I inherited it, you're one of the first pages that would pop in the algorithm in your work. And so as I've got familiar with it, it's always captivating. It's always been awe-inspiring to me. And I've always wanted to reach out and to connect and get to know how you do what you do and your thought process. And with us starting, this podcast, it sort of was like the scapegoat in the end. And so I'm excited. I know we're both excited to have you here. And so there's a lot. You have an incredible path. It's definitely inspiring, especially to a lot of emerging talents that today there's so many creatives out and the outlets and the abilities to do such things. But there's always a starting point. There's always the origin story with all of us. And I'm definitely curious, I know Janico as well, do you have any of your earliest memories that you can sort of pull and share with us when you were first exposed to photography itself?
Yeah, definitely. I guess photography has been in my family in some shape or form. My dad used to be a photographer, and I always find it interesting. He was a freelance photographer of sorts during communism in Slovakia, which is where I was born.
Oh, wow.
So I always thought that was really interesting. And he had his work published in Nature magazines. And unfortunately, all those magazines are gone. I really wish
That's sad.
Family held on to it. So he now collects the magazines that I have. So he makes sure to have them all. But yeah, that's kind of where it started. I think I must have been around photography quite a lot. My sister did photography, and then when I was about 15, 16 years old, it piqued my interest a lot more.
So did your dad ever let you go out with him to any of the photo shoots or any of the nature shoots, or was it just something that you were able to just experience when he brought all that back?
No, I've never witnessed it. I think it was even potentially slightly before my time. So okay. I've never seen him photograph, but I do have the camera that he used.
That is incredible. I've always been curious about that too. And what does it feel like to be, and do you use it now, like in this very technology driven world, having something analog and it feels like a way to connect more with the moment, because the thought that has to go into it, because it's not so instantaneous with like 128 gigabyte card. It's a single frame. We have to be thoughtful of the light, the film, ISO speed that we have in there. Like, is that special to you when you're able to pull that out and use it, or do you even use it at all when you go out?
Yeah, I did use it. So it's the double lens Flexorette camera, and I have some photographs that he's taken on it. So I found the negatives and I reprinted some of the photographs, and I have shot on it as well. It's actually in my apartment now. So it ended up in Australia, and then of course whenever I moved, it comes with me. So it's here.
Yeah. So what made you want to focus, I guess, stick with the family tradition, right? And focus on the environment?
I think the environment side came as an extension of my general interests. And I used to work as an educational officer in a wildlife park when I was 19 throughout my studies. So while I was studying photography, I was also working there. And it became very interlinked. I think naturally curious about nature, and I think this, the education of the photography and learning on how to be an educational staff came side by side and continued onwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I can't imagine like working in a place and photographing like animals and like nature and stuff like that. It's so different from like what we do.
And it was a great learning opportunity because obviously it's confined. So the animals are in a certain area, and then you get to practice your photography on an animal that in the wild would be so much harder to document. And one of my first projects was actually documenting sea lions, but they were in a aquarium and I photographed them through a tunnel. So my first underwater photograph was actually not underwater at all. And it was through the tunnel. So, and I photographed that project on both film and digital. It was 8 megapixel, little camera at the time.
So do you feel that where you grew up and where your home is, because of how it's landlocked, your drive and the incredible moments and your passion and excitement for the water, for the deep, rich world that's there that a lot of us, really don't get to experience firsthand. Is that something that, because you didn't necessarily grow up with that, is that a driving force to why you're so excited to continually explore that? Or can you sort of give us a peek behind the curtain of like the thought process of what keeps driving you forward, keeps putting you in these incredible places that are so different than maybe that maybe that was around you when you were growing up?
Yeah, definitely. I guess our whole family relocated, so we moved a couple of times. We lived in France for a tiny little bit, and Czech Republic. We applied for a visa to move to Canada and got rejected, and then we got approved.
Did they say
Australia.
why? Do you know why they got rejected in Canada, or just
that? I don't know. I'm sure there was a reason, but I can, my life would look very, very different if we did indeed end up in Canada. And when we moved to Australia, I think there was a big desire from my dad's point of view to be near the water. He just felt like that's what he wanted to see throughout his day to day. So I had this wonderful exposure and incredible access to it. And I would say, swimming capabilities, questionable at the time. So it's a big intimidating factor to see those waves. The water behaves very differently when you're out in the open, such as the beaches in Australia. So it was something to be really admired. And it's, I guess, in an environment that's so close, you get to step into it if you live near it, but very diverse and ever changing as well.
So, and again, this is jokingly, and no, it's more. I definitely see it in America, where you see the memes that go around with us as everything can kill you in Australia. And so I don't know if that's something that's jokingly shared around there, but I know growing up, just seeing these incredible shots of Australia as a kid, it's always been a place I've wanted to go. And I know the U.S. military has grown its partnership to where there's opportunities to do that. But as I've gotten older and social media has become a thing for all of us, and people share again, these spiders that are the size of my head, everything, like, just something that's so beautiful. It just scares you. It gives me nightmares. And is that something with you living there? Is that even real? Is that just, someone's scary propaganda that they're scaring me from going to live out my dream as at my childhood dream, or is everything like, because you, if anyone that goes out in nature and really gets intimate, you would experience it. So you can solve this dilemma for me. Are these things real, or should I not be scared, and should I buy my ticket tomorrow and come explore?
I think you should definitely come and buy a ticket and visit. And in some ways, it is true. So, both.
Oh, no.
I think Australia doesn't really have any big land predators. So it's very different to, North America and other places where you have different kinds of animals to interact with. And, Slovakia has brown bears and wolves and things like that. So that's something I didn't actively grow up with. So I would say the land is, the things that kill you are a bit smaller, like much more. Yeah, maybe the size of your head.
See it coming.
But
I don't know, them drop bears. I heard about them. I'm not sure.
I know, those claws will get you. But in terms of, I would say the ocean has more of that diversity of wildlife that could be highly venomous, etc. But I think if you're aware and you have a sense of understanding of what the environment is that you're working in or navigating, that goes a really long way. And I would say one of the big things is navigating places where there's saltwater crocodiles, for instance. So being really cautious around that. So I think Australians tend to be quite well versed with the things that can kill us. And so far we're doing okay.
What are you doing? Out of all the bears, out of all the places you could visit, if I were to be mauled by a koala bear, I would not be upset. I would not be upset. And I'm sorry for being so silly.
No, as a general rule of thumb, I can't get mad at something for killing me if I'm in its house, right? Like, I feel like if I go into the environment, then whatever happens to me happens because I went, right? The only time I'm gonna get mad is if you come in here. That's, I feel like that's a good rule of thumb.
I think that's fair. There's sometimes you see those videos of a snake on the plane or coming out of a car, and you're like, okay, sure, it's traveling with us, but that's how I approach environment as well. I kind of go, well, this is their territory, exactly. What you said. This is their home, and we're entering their space, and it's up to us to navigate that as safely as possible.
Right. So with that, like with us, military photographers, we usually get a warning or a brief or something about what's in the area, whether like it's people, cultural norms, or, temperatures to worry about. So how do you prepare for new environments that you're going into?
I guess one of the big things is that, that information, what you just mentioned, is also really useful, across any kind of photography as well, including nature and wildlife. You mentioned the weather. That's a really big factor to looking at weather patterns and choosing the safest time to go. You don't, it doesn't always play out that way. Nature will always throw you something. Working with experienced guides, I quite often on projects will be working along with someone else that has a really good understanding of the environment that we're entering. Either I feel really comfortable with it and I'm like, yes, I know what I'm getting myself into, or I'm working with someone that also has my back but understands the ecosystem really well too. So it's collaboration with local knowledge, and again, just gaining as much understanding of the patterns of weather, but also the animals that you're working with and how that might look like when you're engaging in photographing them.
Do you have any particular, is there moments that you can recall and share with us? Like, for instance, I went and had the opportunity to go document a humanitarian mission in Uganda, and we were out in the middle of nowhere. It was beautiful. It was a lot like the pictures that you've seen, to where sometimes you go or you see pictures and you're like, man, that looks heavily edited. Like those blues are super blue, or the orange is super orange. But Uganda was one of the first countries that I visited to where everything looked like it did in the movies, or it looked like it did in the photos. And it was so vibrant. It was so colorful. Everything felt so alive. But also there was a couple experience where I felt like, everything wanted to kill me. And so, for instance, like we were sleeping in the middle of nowhere. I was sleeping, I had a little mosquito net because of the malaria and everything else. But it was all, and, I had a bag. And so it was around 2 a.m. and we did have little lights that would flicker through from time to time. And I woke up for some reason, and I look up, and there's a spider the size of my hand that's making a nest literally, 2 feet away in my mosquito net above my face. And it looks like it's getting ready to crawl down to me. I never had so much fear in my life because, one, I didn't want to scream with all the other grown men and women around me and have a nickname for myself the rest of the time, when maybe it wasn't as big as I thought. And my eyes just can't recollect because it's so dark. But anyways, I slid out. Somehow I escaped. I blacked out. I got tunnel vision, and I just know that I woke. It was for the next 3 to 4 hours until everyone started to wake up and support the operations for the day. I waited for them to turn the lights on, and then sure enough, I had someone that was sleeping beside me, saw the spider in there making a big web and nest, and they took care of it for me. And but the rest of I still had a week there. I still sleep in the same spot. And but anyways, I'm ridiculous. But do you have any stories? They might not be as silly as mine, but is there a particular moment that you can recall going out that, because of the unique places that you visit, you have a unique thing that you just remember that sort of makes you laugh or makes you go like, not again?
Oh, every time I go on a job, I'm like, why am I putting myself through this? I feel the same way. It can be really, really confronting with all the environmental changes that we have. In terms of encounters, I would say that most of negative or like challenging experiences with animals would be when they are either like maybe a rescue animal or a which it already has contact with humans in some ways, so you already have a closer access to an animal that's partially wild or fully or recovering, and there is more of a chance of something happening with completely wild animals, apart from the spider setting up house, which probably he was helping you with the mosquitoes.
Right. Mm-hmm. He was looking at you like,
I misinterpreted it completely. Yeah.
Like, I just built a house in here. I was ready for the whole week, and you just ruined it. Yeah. So if there's spiders, again, unless they're crawling across me, I do like to keep them around because they're great to have as a little mosquito management. But in terms of for like wildlife encounters, the animals, you don't get too close to them unless you're potentially doing something a little bit wrong, or like you're entering a space that maybe you've pushed a little bit too much, and that's sometimes hard to know. And again, working with guides really helps with that, in saying that it can still happen, and maybe that's when you have a bit of a confronting experience. But usually it's been random little things. I was once on a shoot, and there was a rescue eagle, and he was sitting on the ground, and there was some other eagles flying above it. He was nervous, and I moved my hand, and I think that was a signal that the eagle was taught that means to fly. And I think I moved my hand, and then next minute it was just flying at my face. Like, it landed on my face, a little scratch under my eye.
Oh man!
So
it was super
very,
scary.
Very lucky. And I just put my hand up, and the eagle bounced off. I did have like maybe a little collision with a sea lion once, and
maybe
it screamed, I screamed, and we bumped into each other. So the little things like that, where it's more of a spatial, situation where you might get the current or something might push you in a direction. So it's situations like that. But in terms of when you are giving the animal space and you're looking at the body language, it's very unlikely that you'll have a negative experience. Again, some people like to be really close. I'm, on top of a humpback whale's face, almost type scenario. Not you, not you. And I like to have a bit of space and approach a little bit slower. So it might take me a little longer to get there, but I'm reading the situation as I'm going into it. So definitely try and be really spatially aware. And sometimes as I said, I just came back from Borneo and I was walking and I looked down and there's a snake under my foot. So if you're in environments like that, there's animals everywhere. And you just gotta, wear good shoes and hope for the best.
Yeah. This break is brought to you by the Eddie Adams Workshop. Applications for the prestigious Eddie Adams Workshop are now open until May 31st. Join a community of aspiring photographers, learn from industry leaders, and elevate your craft. Don't miss this opportunity. Apply today at eddieadamsworkshop.org. I have, when I was in Iraq, I was fortunate and spoiled because most of the time you're working in a big tent with a lot of people, but because of the kind of field that myself and Janiqua are in, sometimes we have a lot of expensive equipment and we need to be able to do things that aren't necessarily like on a network that isn't going to compromise what everyone else has to do. And so I had my own little office cubby, but it was like in a building separate from everyone else. And it was also at a time where we were transitioning from sleeping in these old tents that were from like the 1980s, and they were actually bringing in hard shelter little trailers. But during that time, I was like, I'm just going to sleep in my office. I have my own little AC. It's 120 degrees here. I'm just going to sleep in there. I have a little cot. It'll be beautiful. And then I turn off the light and for the first night, and then I hear something like slapping around. And I was like, okay, one, that's not something I'm used to and not normal. And two, everything there is lethal. There's nothing kind in that region. And so like I run away. This is a common trend with me. And I've run away. And then sure enough, there was a civilian that was working across the hall he was like an hour later, this 3-foot snake slithered from under my door and left. And I was like, and I slept on someone's floor in a different room. There's no shame in that. I'm alive. I'm here today. And but yes, snakes. I don't know what the value this adds. I just want to share it because I haven't been able to share it. But that's all that I have for that. I don't know, Janiqua, if you want to do something more constructive, I would appreciate it.
I don't know how you all do it. I scream for everything. Yesterday I played a YouTube video and it was a little too loud and I got startled and I was like, so for me, animals and stuff like that, I think the only experience I've had with that wasn't even like as a photographer. I was just sitting in my driveway. I think I was like 10. I was sitting in my driveway. I felt like something was watching me. I turned around and there was a deer. And so I'm like, I'm not sure what to do in this scenario because I don't know nothing about deer. And so I go to get up and it like bows its head and starts like stomping its foot. So I just ran in the garage because I was like, I can't fight this thing. I don't know. And it was around the time where a deer had actually broken into my cousin's house, which is a story for another day. But it's wild times. I don't really know much about nature. So I would definitely need a guide and some guidance in order to survive that scenario. But I was going to ask you mentioned earlier that the first time that you had photographed sea lions, you were in a tunnel. And then you mentioned a possible collision. We won't say yes or no. But like, how was that finally getting to like be in the water near them and getting to experience like, I guess how they play, and people say they're the puppies of the sea. So like, what was that like?
Yeah, definitely very, very exciting. So the photograph was in 2009, and then I didn't get to swim with sea lions or seals until 2014. So there was a bit of a gap between that time. I got trained in scuba diving, and I got a little bit more comfortable with photography as well. And I remember the first encounter actually was off an island. It was murky water, again, terrible conditions, of course. And there was a colony kind of in the background, but we had a lot of trouble finding the animals. And then a seal appeared, and I remember I was filming at the time, and I got so excited, and you just hear this little squeal, and then I switched off the camera. So I got so excited, I turned off the recording by accident.
Oh, man. Oh.
So, it's just like, so that could happen quite a lot. And those guys were, more of a distance. And then as time progressed, it's the Australian sea lion, which happened a little bit later, I think 2019. They are the real puppies of the sea, and they are so incredible. There is less than, I believe, 16,000 in the wild, and they're endemic to Australia, so there's not that many left. And they have colonies that they return to where they're born, so they'll return to the same place. So the environment is very important for them, and where they grew up, where they're born. And that was just a very, very beautiful experience, because they really do. They look at you as if they have a knowing, and it's good to be able to match their energy. I think that's what's quite nice about wildlife. I remember a guy told us never stand up, like it was quite shallow water. He goes, never be taller than the sea lion, because he will think you're challenging them. So one of those things that, as you work with different people, you'll pick up different tips about different animals, and you get to learn every time that you do a job. And so, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be taller than that guy. And by mimicking their body language. So I wasn't on scuba at the time. It was snorkeling or free diving. You get a different kind of energy, because they're matching yours. So the more playful you are, the more playful they are. So I think it's such a, it's always an individual thing, and every animal is a little bit different, and every individual is different too. So you are getting to know them as they're getting to know you in that short time. And quite often you might have, an hour at best in the water with them.
So I'm sorry, Janique. Well, I mean, because I know you put a buffer between you and them, and for safety, for respect, and for a variety of different reasons, but you still capture an intimacy in your shots. And it's something that Janique and I were talking about beforehand and throughout the week, is the way that you capture these moments it feels like, she used a different word, Janique, if you can remind me of yours, but I said like a dreamscape. Like it feels like if I was in a dream, and I feel like I was like in a fantasy world. Like the way that you capture it feels like, one, I'm there with them, which is a huge testament to your ability to, one, not just take a picture to where I'm looking at it, but as someone who's looking at this moment in time, I feel like I could be there. And like, what is your thought process with that? Or am I looking a little bit too far deep into it?
No, thank you for saying that. I think that's really a beautiful feedback, and that's what I want people to feel. And I think it's because that's what it feels like for me when I'm in there with them. It does feel very surreal. It's just this, I think that, again, the ever-changing nature of it, and all the elements that are coming into it that you don't have any control over. And I think, especially when I'm underwater, I do tend to give into it a lot more than when I'm going about my everyday life on land. Mm-hmm. And again, you get to enter this other universe with them, and you are reacting to the environment. So I guess it's quite energetic and energetically focused. And I am, in those moments, what you're feeling is exactly what I'm feeling as well. And it is that connection and that intimacy and that glimpse into another world. And it feels like you just get a little, you pull the curtain away and you get a little peek for a moment. And that does feel really magical for me.
Yeah, that sounds. I was, digging around trying to see what I could find, and I saw this term. And forgive me if I butcher it, but it was kacho fugutsu. Can you talk a little bit about how you found that, and what about that like kind of captured you and made you want to learn more, and then start to, I guess, talk about it more?
Definitely, I think I would say that the term found me before I knew it was a term. I guess that was Kacha Fugetsu. It's a philosophy towards the natural world, and it's about observing and again being immersed, and the everything that comes with the creating of the photographs comes later, so connection first. I've always found myself working in that way in terms of I've done a lot of different kinds of photography. So when I was studying, I did product, I did wedding photography, portrait, almost every kind of photography you can think of. I've probably tried at some point throughout my studies or working life. And it wasn't until I started doing nature photography and really leaned into it that other people started to connect to the work as well. So I feel like that's very true for most creatives out there. It's what you're connected to. And that philosophy, I suppose, is just as you're moving through the world and you get so much pleasure and enjoyment just by being in it. And I think one of the, if you watch the Culture Forgets a video, I speak about how nature doesn't need a witness. It exists and it will keep on going long after we're gone. And I think I like where that places me in the world and places us in the universe and being part of this great, beautiful cycle of life. I think that's what I really connect to.
I think the closest I've ever gotten to that is like going on vacation and deciding not to pull out my phone, right? And just having those moments like for myself, and trying to be present, with whoever I'm on vacation with, and just trying to be there instead of trying to capture it so everyone else can see how much fun I'm having. How do you know? You said, sometimes you immerse yourself inside of the environment before you decide to start taking pictures. So how do you know when to start? And then how do you know which moments to keep for yourself and which ones, to capture?
Great question. And that one's really hard because I might say something quite contradictory because it's really hard for me to put down the camera. And I think in terms of it, it really depends. It really depends. Sometimes I almost do it in reverse. So sometimes I'll be like, let's just get a few shots out there, and then allow myself to the feeling of putting down the camera, the heavy equipment, and then let's say being and floating through that water is just so amazing. So you get that beautiful release. Or it's more when I'm actively like spotting or looking for something in that moment, it makes a lot more sense for me to watch and observe and, again, let it unfold quite naturally. So I would be switching quite often. I'd be switching between taking photographs or enjoying, and that can happen at the same time, I think, and part of the enjoyment is the photography for me, absolutely. And then it's like feeling it. So for example, with the humpback whales, I remember, it's quite an overwhelming experience to be faced with an animal that's the size of one of your yellow school buses.
You're right.
That's
Yeah.
the best comparison I can give. And I remember there was a humpback whale singing in the ocean, and we went in the water when we couldn't see the whale, but you could feel the vibrations of the song go
That's
through your body.
intense.
And that's, I got goosebumps at just remembering that. So that is something that's so surreal, and you can't ever capture that. You get to feel it if you're lucky and you happen to be there. And what I loved about that sensation or that moment is that that whale could have been 2 kilometers away. I'm not sure how much it is in miles, but 2 kilometers.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Us neither.
America.
We don't know either.
We're not.
Far away.
America will catch up one day. We'll get on the same system eventually.
Or not. We don't know. We don't know.
And yeah, so again, it's something that's completely unseen, but you get that strong sensation. So, and you can't photograph that. You're just feeling it, and that's beautiful.
I am a crier, so I would have been in there weeping. Like, there is no way. There's no way. I would have been out there like, do you hear him? He's singing his song.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm a crier too, and I also, if I get too excited, I'll start to like scream a little bit, and that's really hilarious when you're trying to record some audio, and which is something that I do try and do. And as I mentioned, I just came back from a trip from a rainforest, and the sounds were so incredible, and I just loved, again, at morning, walking through the forest and listening to that. And it wasn't until the last day, and I was like, I need to record this, and it was interesting that I had to make myself to record it, knowing that it's never going to feel the same, but knowing I want to be able to go back to that moment. And I think sound is a really wonderful way to access that side of memories.
I think that's incredible advice, and I think I'm going to steal that from you, especially when Janiqua compliments me at work. I'll record it and play it back, and but I think like you've learned a lot, especially as these experiences come up, and we're always learning, and we're always going to be students. And like for you, if you were to go back and speak to the you who's at the starting line and starting this adventure, are there any specific things, if you could, or maybe we just share one thing, if you could only share one thing with the you who was just starting out that now that could be hugely beneficial, what would that be?
One thing that was hugely beneficial, and this is something that was taught to me, is having, like, if I can summarize it, style first, or a sense of who you are as a creative, and having a cohesive look and feel. So I feel like that is great to have as a very specific thing, but being very broad with your skill set. So being really diverse in your skills, but quite specific in your style and who you are as an artist when you're approaching the work. Absolutely. Because then it allows you to go across different genres. It allows you to enter different industries, and you still get a sense of yourself, and people get to know you as well, and they get to know your work. And I think that's something that's quite hard. And I was maybe a little bit lucky because social media back then was just starting out. Facebook was quite fresh still. And so a lot of our education came from beautiful photo books, beautiful magazines, exhibitions. So very, curated visual information, whereas now there is, it's everywhere that you look, and it can start to have a similar, how do you know where one person starts and another one comes in? It's a bit tricky. So having a distinct style and approach to your work, I think and that takes a long time to find, and I think it's also okay if it changes over time and develops, and a new knowledge comes into that work. As you said, we're always learning, and then constantly upskilling and seeking knowledge as well.
So for like with that, and we all have inspirations that we latch on to, especially starting out, that help us like cultivate that style, cultivate how to start navigating what we're interested in and what we're passionate about. When you were starting out, or even still now, is there anyone's work that excited you to pursue what you're doing now? And if so, have you had the opportunity to ever chat with them, ever meet them? Or is there someone still that you want to give a shout out to right now? Like, hey, like I'd love to meet. I'd love to talk about your work. You've inspired me to do so much.
Again, great question. I'm so glad that you asked. I had a couple of really wonderful teachers, but few specific ones introduced me to a slightly different kind of photography, and it was the work of an Australian photographer, Trent Park, and his partner, Narelle Audio. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Trent Park's work. He is part of the Magnum Club. He's the only Magnum member that comes from Australia. And Narelle's work as well is just absolutely stunning. And one of my teachers introduced me to their work when I was studying, and I was just completely blown away. I've never seen, it was, cross-section of photojournalism, documentary, and art. And I've never seen the natural world captured in the way that they have done it. And I was very, very lucky. I actually got accepted to do a workshop with Trent Park in 2012. So it was a Magnum workshop for 5 days, I believe. And then later I've gotten to meet Narelle as well. And they're beautiful people, very accessible, friendly, and just, good humans and amazing artists. And they've a huge inspiration on my work to this day, absolutely to this day. And a lot of the things that I've learned come from things that I've seen.
This sponsor break is brought to you by the Daikon Center, educating the next generation of Africa's creative leaders to transform Africa. At the Daikon Center, they nurture the boundless potential of Africa's youth. They believe visual storytelling is a transformative force, and they harness its power to equip future leaders with essential skills. Through their dynamic education programs, vibrant community building initiatives, captivating exhibitions, innovative lab, and engaging public programs, they create a nurturing space for the art of storytelling. Back to the show.
Them speak about and teach as well.
Well, I definitely, I love that. And I know, especially like when it comes to the Eddie Adams workshop, to have so many titans of the industry be there. And when these 100 students that come in every year, that they've been in awe inspired of their work or their accomplishments or whatever reason that they latch on to the moments that these individuals captured, or this body of work that inspires them to pursue something similar, to hone their own path themselves. When they finally meet them in person, you see this, like the shoulders and everything tense. And then finally, after the first conversation, the shoulders are relaxed. They're seeing that they're just a normal human being, that they're, everyone there is incredibly kind and giving. And they just too, these these team leaders, these volunteers, that whether they're a Pulitzer Prize winner and they're in the kitchen cooking, mashed potatoes to serve to the kids, and these kids, these young emerging talents that are coming through, have no clue of some of these individuals that again, they just want to be there to give back to the up and coming individuals that are going to do incredible things with their careers. And so for you as well, again, like if there's an opportunity to where your schedule's ever free and you're available, and like speaking at the workshop is something that interests you, and you find yourself in North America, 100%, again, like more than welcome to talk and set something like that up, in the future, because I know your work, as we also bring in like these young students, it's also showing them there's more than just photojournalism. There's there's the diversity of what the workshop tries to do when you're there. Part of the training aid of what they do while they're shooting there is going to be more journalistic, but for even when they see their peers around them, some of them shoot fine art, some of them shoot landscape, some of them do commercial work, some of them do environmental. And so it's really a melting pot that's around them that are not just the leaders there. And so by having someone like you, again, not trying to pressure you, if you find the time and you find it opportunistic for yourself to also inspire these individuals, because there'll be someone in the crowd that will look at it and be like, she's incredibly nice. Their work is incredible. This now could be a path I could pursue myself. And they might not come and tell you, because they're going to be like, they're going to have a helmet fire. They're going to be so overwhelmed for how like incredible the week is. But I guarantee when they walk away and resonate from the experience and and know that they could potentially reach out and talk and chat with you, it changes lives. And again, I think what you share contributes to that. And just think about it. Just plant that seed there.
No, absolutely.
Just think about it.
Absolutely. And actually, in 2017, I got to go to the workshop. And
oh, wow. Okay.
A group of us were there, and we did portfolio reviews, and we did do
wow
as well. Yes. And that was, I could see the energy, and I could see what it's about, and how it looked daunting, like it looked I can imagine for people being there going, oh my goodness, I need to get all that knowledge into me as much as possible. And it was a very incredible space for people to build community. And I think that's what's really important in photography too, that if you maybe don't, I don't believe that people have to go through formal studies. I don't think you have to go to university to study photography. Best way to learn is by doing it, but the community part is really important, and the feedback. So having someone to mentor you, and that's what I've had throughout my life, and I still do. And having someone to go, you're doing okay, and keep on going is so important. So I think that, the workshop provides a community for people who go. And I'm guessing the relationships keep on developing for years and years after.
100%. And you're absolutely right. And it's something that we like to definitely talk about on the podcast when the conversation comes up, is because a lot of people do apply to the workshop and they only do select 100. And something that can happen is people see their peers go, or they apply one or two times and they still haven't got in. And what we like to share is that you don't have to go to this workshop to be successful in your career path. You don't have to go, like you said, you don't have to necessarily have any kind of formal training whatsoever. Like you said too, social media and YouTube, there's so much information that's freely given in so many different avenues and platforms to where you can learn stuff, to where back in the day we had encyclopedias and National Geographic magazines, and that's really all we had as reference, unless we did get into a formal kind of institution or educational pathway. And so 100%, like, yes, you don't have to go in to anywhere, or if you don't get into the Eddie Adams workshop, there's a lot of other incredible workshops out there that can still give you incredible tools, a community, a network, all of those things. And so just because this, the podcast, we like to, again, uplift the workshop and talk about it when we can. We definitely want to be 100% authentic in saying there's more than one path for someone to navigate success for themselves. And no, thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. We do. And so
there's so many ways. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, exactly what you said. And when I've done some portfolio reviews here in Australia, and the people, it was remarkable. Most of them maybe have finished some sort of studies or are doing studies in another field, and they are coming and looking for community. They're looking for their people. And so it's never been more important, I think, to allow space for that, whether that's, as you said, online or in person. And I think we always have to be, maybe aware of who we're getting feedback from. But I remember when I was finishing my studies or trying to figure out my way in the world, and I would email photographers and I'd reach out and say, if I was local, I would say, I would really love to learn more about what you do. Would we be able to set up a meeting? And if that's not possible, even just having a conversation and reaching out. So just as you said, I do encourage people to reach out and also not to give up after one no reply or two, keep on following up and checking in, and maybe that opportunity will present itself when the time is right.
100%. Like, there's one story. I'll try to make it as brief as possible, Janiqua. Bear with me. So around this time, I love talking about this for the potential applicants or the applicants is Cesar Rodriguez. He is, in my opinion, I fell in love with his work the second I saw it, and then also met him my first year going back as a volunteer to the Eddie Adams workshop. And his story is incredible of like what you shared, perseverance. And if you want something to not give up when it doesn't necessarily go your way the first, second, or even third time. Cesar, too, he never had a formal education. He just lived his best life. And then he got to the point as a professional career. He was a chocolatier. Like, he opened up his own sweet shop, and then, but he loved photography. He wanted to pursue it as a career path. And so what he did is one of the biggest days of the year, as he called it, Lover's Day, on Lover's Day, with Valentine's Day, he sold all the stuff in his shop. And the very next day he closed it up. He just picked up his camera and he started charting his own path. And along that path is he met someone who actually was a team leader for the workshop, who told him to apply. And when he applied, he got denied. So he thought, again, he was going to get in this first time, but he didn't. He actually got denied, I think, 4 times, which is incredible. That kind of perseverance, I don't have that in me. It's a testament and an inspirational story for others to where he got in because he wanted to go. But when you look at his work, did he ever have to be there? No. It's just his work, similar to yours. He captures things in a way to where I feel like I'm there. And then his work, it just feels like there's texture to it. When I look at his shots, I feel like I could rub my hand over the image and feel everything that's there. And it's incredible the kind of eye and the creative touch that he puts into his moments and everything that he captures, to where I try to echo this during this application period, to where, one, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to have anything to pursue this path. Two, if you want to work to getting to this workshop, don't give up. It's almost a rite of passage to get a no the first time for us. And then if you get in the second, third, or fourth time, great. But even if you don't, Cesar, people like Cesar, myself, Janiqua, are available to you to reach out and connect. And we can be friends that way. We don't necessarily have to do it during that, but highly passionate but stressful time, because they're, like you said, they're trying to take in so much. The week you're there, and we just want to build a sense of community in any way, shape, or form. But anyways, I know I'm rambling off. And for your workshops there, like what do you see with your community there that you like to hone and grow for the workshops that you host and the community that you try to bring in?
Something that I found really helpful when I was developing my style is I used to live in Sydney, and we had a photo group that would meet up once a month. And the best thing about this group, that the photography was very diverse. We were all like equally the same level of insane, and loved right. Getting out there and just really following what we wanted to do. But in terms of topics and styles, like really different. So I think it's really important to have that kind of diversity in a group, that not everyone shoots exactly the same way as you, so because you might end up in a bit of a feedback loop. But we would get together about once a month, and we would show and present our work. And it started off in the pub. We'd bring little 6x4-inch, very poorly printed little photographs, and we would lay them out on a table and be like, oh, this is what I've been working on. And then everyone would be in a slightly different stage of their projects. Someone was just starting, another person was in, the editing, sequencing, maybe someone else was working on exhibition, and later it maybe became a book. So we got to see the whole process of everyone. And then more and more people, we had like the core group of people, and more wanted to come. Other people heard about it and go, well, can I come and show? And we would have guests coming to show their work. And then it got too big for a pub. And we're like, well, we can't really sustain this in the same way. So we ended up doing public presentations. So, projector, someone donated their space for the night. Chairs, sit on the ground, and people would get up and speak about their work. And then eventually it became a little bit more official, where people would apply to present. And what was really beautiful about it, that we would have, editors come in and people that would curate in galleries, and the experience of the photographers presenting were, again, from someone just starting off to someone that's been working on a project for 20 years and presenting.
Wild.
And
wow.
So diverse. And having that experience of standing up in front of someone, which I know is also part of the Eddie Adams workshop, is you have to present your work, is having that experience of talking about what it is that you're making and being able to verbalize it is so important. So that's something that I can see missing in the community here, and just even based on that one afternoon of portfolio reviews, and every single person said the same thing: I'm looking for feedback, I'm looking for community. And that's something that space provided in Sydney. So hoping to be able to extend it to Melbourne, where I live right now, as well.
That's awesome. So I know, Jiku, do you have anything specific before I sort of drop the super fun less stressful question, or actually I'll bestow that to you?
I got one more question.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier, about having a diversity of like skill sets and different, I guess, skills that you have as far as within photography, but I also saw like there's some documentary stuff and video stuff, and you talked about getting audio. One, why is that diversity so important to you? And two, how do you decide which different ways you want to tell the story and which medium to use to do that?
Great question. So basically, in terms of, I guess my primary skill set would be photography led. And then throughout working, you can see there's, demand for video, there's demand for audio, there's demands of being on camera talent as well. So I have found that the more jobs that I did, the more requirements there were for different kind of skill sets. And it just means that you're able to offer more, again, diversity in your storytelling. I do think it's really important. And you do have to pick and choose, of course. I think one has to have more weight in that particular story. So, because you can't do both the same way, if that makes sense, unless you have a tremendous amount of time in the field. So depending on what the project is, but generally speaking is photography first, and then I'm capturing additional pieces of audio and video. And I do that for my personal projects as well, because you never know when you're gonna use that content. And I remember my very first time traveling to Antarctica was 2016, and I was there commissioned by my sponsor, OM Systems. And when I pitched it, I was like, we're going to get leopard seals, we're going to get penguins and photograph underwater in Antarctica. Of course, famous last words, and it was zero visibility. So no visibility, could not even see the end of my foot when I was in the water. So there was no chance of me getting any kind of photograph of those animals in those kind of conditions. And I was very sleep deprived. I could not sleep. I was so stressed. And I happened to wander outside the cabins around 1 a.m. and there was just this most brilliant sunset I've ever seen in my life. Like just this deep orange glow. And of course, at the time, I had no idea I was witnessing something that's not usual. When you go to a place for the first time and you're witnessing things, you don't know if that's something that happens often or not. And I remember I got, a few seconds of footage, some photographs and some footage of it, because it was just so stunning. And me and one other person were the only ones there at that time of the night. And that footage became part of a greater film piece that I eventually showed at TEDx Sydney. And it also, got into in different installations. I showed it in exhibitions. So you never know where you're going to use it. And years and years after that was filmed or photographed. So it's a way of future-proofing your work as well. And, collecting all the pieces, because maybe at the time it doesn't have a specific purpose, and that's okay. It's just you've got it, and see what you want to do with it afterwards. So I think that's really important for document keeping, but also future proofing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I can't imagine going to Antarctica, but also did you say that was your first time going, or that was the only time that you went?
The first time, and I thought that was going to be the only time. Again, I couldn't have known I'd go back then.
And what's it been like to go back, later, in terms of one, like, experience, but also, climate change and the different ways that the climate is changing?
It's very surreal, because you can really see the difference in the climate. Again, it's small sample size, because I travel there throughout a window of opportunity. It's summer. The ships will look for good weather as well, so they'll look for the sunny days. But of course, when you get there and it's 20 degrees Celsius and you've got short sleeves on, something is not quite right.
Right.
No matter if it's your first time or not. So there are moments where it's unbelievably warm. You can see waterfalls coming off the cliffs because of the ice melt and things like that. So back then, maybe it wasn't as visible, 2016, but being back a few times, you can see it more and more clearly. And I have a project that addresses that. And I there's a sentence I use to describe it, and I say that I see climate change in a similar way that an illness might take over a body. So, you might start really small and seep in, but by the time it's really visible, just like climate change, it's quite often a bit too late. It's so much harder to bring it back to its natural system. So I look at it in a similar way a human body works in an environment, just as it does. And in Antarctica, you can really see the difference now. And and of course now there is other obstacles, such as the bird flu that had traveled from the north, and that's wildlife brought it there, but it's another thing that ecosystem has to deal with.
Yeah. One more question. Sorry, I got another follow-up. I know. So, like, the analogy of having it, thinking about it as an illness, right? I think sometimes when we find out that we're sick, or, whether it's terminal, or, we break our arm or something, it gives us a new outlook. And it also sometimes, depending on how severe it is, gives us a sense of urgency. Do you feel like noticing those things and seeing those things have given your work a sense of urgency, as far as either capturing more things before they're no longer around, or even in terms of advocating in bringing awareness to the problem?
I think a bit of both, but definitely both. But I also like to remind myself that we're part of such a greater system. We're just a small piece in the cog, and I like to look at my work and environmental work as ongoing past our lifetime. So it's something important to talk about. It's important to bring to light and to see. However, I also recognize that change takes time. It takes the government perhaps have to change, the policies have to change. There's so much that has to happen for us to see any kind of difference. So I feel like when there's a huge sense of urgency, it can be very anxiety provoking, and it can feel very defeating as well. So I like to think of it, let's look at it as a lifetimes of work, and hopefully we can, keep on continuing, and whoever comes after us, I feel like it might get harder and harder, but it's not just for one lifetime, and it's not just for one person to have to tackle. And the more awareness, the more conversation, the better. And I'm just trying to, I guess, add to that, to get people to think about it, but not to be anxiety ridden about it, and to feel like there is a change that's possible.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, because it can be overwhelming, thinking about any change that's beyond, just what you can do in your small little bubble or with your life. I know I feel the same way every summer, because it's hot as hell and it's only getting hotter. And I'm like, what are we going to do? And then I'm like, it can't just be me, it can't just be a group, but all of us together, it kind of has to be that kind of thing.
All of us together, and not with like heaviness in our hearts, because I think life is already hard enough as it is, and that's we still have a lot to look forward to.
Indeed. How you feeling, Griff?
I love it. No, I'm really, I get to, as a bystander, and get to witness the conversation and reflect on my decisions. And so I appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. I think we're just like looking at each other to see who is going to ask the last
question, because it's a very juicy question, and I guess maybe I was trying to build suspense unknowingly, and because it's a question, like if we were privately, not to record this conversation, we'd probably feel like, oh, I love this photo, or this is my favorite photo. But the second we press the record button, and the world is going to listen to this, and it's going to live forever, everyone's going to connect us to our opinion on this one shot. And so, but at the same time, it's not that serious, it isn't, but it is what we make it. So with all my rambling, can you share with us your favorite photo? And again, this can be answered any way. It can be your photo. It can be someone else's photo. We actually just spoke with Esther Horvath, where she actually shared that her favorite photo isn't a photo. It's actually a painting from Rembrandt, because of the way that he sees light, and they put it into their work. And so for you, can you share with us your favorite photo?
Oh, big question. And I love Esther's answer. I think that's very, very beautiful. In terms of someone else's photograph, someone else's work, I think that's a really hard one for me to choose, because there are so many. I mean, countless of artworks. I love, for example, the work of James Turrell, and he is an artist that manipulates light. He manipulates the way we see light. So you're basically looking into a void and feeling the colors and the shades and perception shift. So that is quite an amazing experience. And so I love, I guess, works that distort, or not distort reality, but bring you into another world by something that is so simple and, again, accessible, such as light. I think that is incredible. And in terms of maybe something of my own, I would say it's more of a moment as opposed to a specific photograph. But I have a photo of a cactus that only blooms a couple of times a year, usually around full moon, and by the time morning comes, the flower wilts. And I remember coming across this flower, and I moved to the Northern Rivers in New South Wales, and I was wandering around, and I saw the cactus, and I saw that most of the flowers have already bloomed and gone. And there was one still
sprinting,
just one single one left. And I was like, okay, wow, I want to be able to witness that. And I would go and visit it every night, walk at night and go and see it. And it wasn't opening. Nothing was happening. And then one night I was already ready for bed. I had changed and I was like, I have to go and see it. I have to make myself get out of my pajamas and walk over there at midnight to go and see. And I did. And sure enough, that's the night that the flower had opened. And it was just such a beautiful moment to witness. And again, knowing that it happens throughout the darkness of the night. No one gets to witness this. And by the morning, it's all over. And I was just very, very fortunate to have that kind of experience. And I think the learning lesson for me was, again, that persistence and that just keep on going and not to have an expectation of nature to give us anything, but showing up is one of the most important things that we can do.
I love that. I mean, Janiqua, I don't feel like I could end it on a stronger note with advice. I would fumble and drop the ball. But yes, I want to thank you. We want to thank you. This was incredible. We really enjoyed this and loved the conversation. And we're grateful for you to share the time, especially just coming back from a trip. Before we let you go, is there anything specifically you'd like to share, showcase to the world before you go enjoy the rest of your weekend?
Oh, no, I think I'm really glad I got to have this conversation. And I'm glad that you guys are doing this, because I think it really showcases to emerging photographers or established just the different pathways that people take. And that it's a lifetime of work. It's not one photograph, it's not one project, and you just have to, as I said, keep on showing up and see where that takes you. It's the best that we can do, and be very honest with yourself, what it is that you are connecting to, and I think the world will respond to that.
Beautiful. I mean, she's doubling up on the incredible.
Right. It's too many.
Awesome. And with that, Michaela, thank you so much. We'll definitely let you go. Thank you for your time today.
No, thank you.
Woo!
I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Long Roll Podcast. A huge shout out goes to my co-host, Janiqua Robinson, again, carrying us to the finish line, creating another incredible episode I know you all loved. But most importantly, thank you to our audience, our listeners, our subscribers. Without you, none of this is possible. And so if you really love this episode, you enjoy what we're doing here, please support us by sharing with your friends, family, anyone that you know that you think that will also enjoy this just as much as you do. And with that, I bid you adieu. We hope to see you back here soon.